Greetings and salutations all. Thank you for attending this March 20th special long-term operation planning special board meeting. Roll call, please, Mr. Atkins.
Dr. Akbar.
Here.
Mr. Alexander.
Present.
Ms. Autry.
Here.
Mr. Perry. Dr. Hall.
Aye.
Ms. Jackson.
Present.
Mrs. McKittrick.
Here.
Okay. Next, we will say the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand for the pledge if you are able. Vice President Autry, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So next, we're going to proceed to request to address the board. First, let me begin by reading the usual preamble that we read every board meeting. Participants will not be permitted to speak on matters related to vendors or business matters, formal complaints, grievances, specific student or student records, personnel matters, and potential or pending legal matters. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. The board will not respond, but will assign, through the superintendent, the appropriate person for follow-up. So I know that we have a number of folks here tonight that wish to address the board. You should know that customarily we allow for 20 minutes public comment, which is approximately 7 people. Tonight, I'm going to waive that policy, and we're going to try to get to as many folks as we can. Please keep in mind, though, that we do have a presentation that Dr. Thompson is going to provide tonight that will also provide some updates to what some of you have seen in the papers the last several days. So some of the comments that some of you may have tonight, I believe, will be assuaged, at least in part, by some of the components of Dr. Thompson's presentation tonight. A couple other things that I'd like to add. First, to be clear, because there is a lot of mis and disinformation out there right now around this topic, so I want to just clarify a few things that I think may lend itself to a more productive use of this time. Number one, no decisions have been made by this board yet, none. So the emails that I've gotten that seem to think that we've already decided or made our minds up, that's just not accurate. Number two, the 4th and 5th grade components. I see some signs out there about 4th and 5th grade and 5th grade for STEM. Again, those were things that were in the options. But again, Dr. Thompson tonight is going to, in his remarks, is going to talk about some options that are inclusive of keeping 4th and 5th grade at Miller and 5th grade at STEM. So again, so those of you who are here tonight to talk about that, that's going to be addressed in Dr. Thompson's presentation. I've gotten emails about the STEM high school. We are losing that building at the end of next year. We were supposed to lose it this summer, I want to say June or July of this year. We have been negotiating in good faith with the University of Akron to extend our lease 1 more year, but the university has plans for that space. So that building is not our building after, we're leasing it now, but we cannot be in that building after next year anyways. So the STEM high school has got to go somewhere, okay? It can't stay in the Central Howard building. Next, what I would say is, listen, these are tumultuous and polarizing times that we live in, and this board has been dedicated to trying to create safe spaces for rational discourse. We want to create time tonight for passionate communication, but we also ask that it's also respectful communication, because the one thing that everyone in this room has in common, regardless of how this planning process turns out, the one thing that everyone has in common here, I mean everybody, is that we are all here because we care about our kids and because our kids are our top priority. So please, as you're making your comments tonight, please keep in mind that the people that are sitting around this table, as well as all of you, the one thing that unites us is that we all are putting our kids first, okay? That's the goal of everybody here, is to put our kids first. So having said that, let us go. And by the way, I'm trying to read some of the handwriting. I thought my handwriting was bad. So if I don't get part of the name right, or if I call a name more than once, I'll try not to do that. I'm sorry. The last thing I'll ask as well is that I've got 25 people, I think, signed up here. 25. We're probably not going to get through 25 people, right? Because again, we do have a presentation that we want to get to tonight that I think all of you in this room are going to find interesting. So insofar as somebody is saying something that you're, so as we walk through this, if somebody's saying something that you've already said, I may ask, just with respect, to cede your time to somebody else. If you want to get up there and say, hey, what he said or what she said, and sit back down, that's fine too. Again, you're more than welcome to use your time however you like it and like to do it. But again, we're trying to get the greatest variety. So if somebody's saying what you've already said, maybe consider not taking up the 3 minutes. But it's your choice. Okay, having said that, I'll just take the order I have on this sheet. Number 1, Carly Wetzel. Please step to the microphone.
Good afternoon, or good evening now. My name is Carly Wetzel. I'm the Miller South PTA president. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Miller South parents. We have a petition that I emailed you this afternoon with today, at this point, it's over 550 signatures. I actually think it's 580 signatures, and all from the Miller South community. We want to thank you for the opportunity to speak about our concerns. While we would be sad to leave the unique building that houses 30 years of creativity and character, we recognize the need. Our concerns revolve around your proposed removal of 4th and 5th grade from the school and the required arts facilities necessary to operate an arts school. Since its inception, the school has allowed older students to mentor the younger kids. The chance to remain young at heart while setting an example blends the older and younger grades, allowing them to benefit from each other. We want to maintain that dynamic within the school. Eliminating the chance for 4th and 5th graders to develop their artistic talents and asking them to wait 2 years before entering the program is robbing those students of the self-confidence and the growth that happens. That early chance to hone their emerging talents is impactful. To deprive artistic students of an environment to embrace their skills would downplay the value of performing arts. Now, speaking personally as a student parent and as an alumni, I will emphasize how 4th and 5th grade are essential to the DNA of Miller South and its proven success. Don't make them wait to invest in their talents until the 6th grade. I think the prospect of a new facility to house Miller South would be fantastic. The community of Kenmore has expressed a desire to welcome that type of facility into their city. However, the current proposals appear to be, 1, blending Miller South with another building, 2, giving your magnet schools a small corner of an already crowded high school building, or 3, putting Miller South into an elementary school building without the necessary arts facilities. You have a distinctive opportunity to create an individualized building and equip it, ensuring the legacy that Miller South has modeled for 30 years. Your proposals offer up $67 million to build schools for Kenmore, with Miller South there as an afterthought. There's $15 million for a sports complex. That structure is in all 3 proposals. Athletic kids aren't the only ones worth extra investment. There's $65 million to fix North High School and a mention of funds to remodel the Morley building for STEM. There is no mention of any funding considerations to help preserve Miller South. There is nothing to give them the required facilities needed. At the building, the boiler needs replaced. The roof is leaking. The 4th and 5th grade stairwell is unsafe. We aren't asking for anything more than a safe building with the required needs to operate an art school. Your proposals would be giving us nothing and taking away what Miller South needs. It appears you have no desire to preserve what Miller South has built and what these kids deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Allison Rich, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you to the Board of Education for your time this evening. My name is Allison Rich, and I'm a visual art teacher at Miller South School for the Visual and Performing Arts. Tonight, I would like to ask you to reevaluate the proposed options of removing 4th and 5th grade from Miller South, if that is the plan you choose, and making it 6th through 8th grades. Miller South gives young students a solid foundation in the arts that aids SEL and creates a sense of belonging. In an age where students can use apps to literally think for them, parents in our community know that Miller South provides students with lifelong skills that enable them to be creative problem solvers for life. Since COVID learning in 2020, there has been a 108% increase in the number of students auditioning at Miller South in 4th grade alone. Last year, we changed the audition process to be more equitable, assessing students where they were, meeting them where they were, rather than having them prepare an audition. Our audition numbers went from 36 to 67 students that year, and this year we had 75 4th graders audition in 4th grade alone. In 5th grade next year, we had so many students audition that we get to add another 5th grade, but through creative staffing, we do not have to hire an additional staff member. Families share with each other what they know about good education. 77% of our students who audition do so because there is a referral from a current student or alumni. 75% of our incoming students are coming from within APS, waiting to audition when they are old enough. Because the arts engaged student learning, our attendance rate is 92.4% compared with 85.1% district-wide, and this is at a school that does not provide daily transportation. Those facts are on the ODE website. This fall, I attended the State of the Arts event at the Akron Civic Theater. Statistic after statistic was shared about how much the arts are growing in Akron, and the Akron Cultural Plan states repeatedly that a strong arts education is vital to having a strong community. If APS wants to reflect what's happening in our community, we should be adding grade levels to Miller South, not proposing an elimination of 2/5 of our programming. And finally, nationally, the Every Student Succeeds Act cites a recent study in Houston of over 10,000 students. It found there are many benefits to arts education in 4th and 5th grade and younger, including a reduction in discipline, an increase in standardized writing scores, an increase in college aspirations. Miller South's test scores and low discipline statistics reflect this kind of education. Please reconsider the proposals to eliminate 4th and 5th grade from Miller South. If these changes occur, it will be a turning point that I fear APS will not recover from. When the arts are eliminated, they seldom are reversed. And the results at Miller South and in our community will be devastating. I truly feel that as a teacher at Miller South. Our future students are counting on you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all these amazing people who showed up.
Next, Tammy Rambler.
Good evening. My name is Tammy Rambler, and 3 of my 4 children have attended Miller South. I could anecdotally speak to our experience at Miller South, which has been phenomenal. However, I hope to offer some larger perspectives about the impact of your vote. I fear that in every proposed plan presented to the board, a fundamental change will occur to Miller South. We strip away programs one thread at a time until they ultimately fail to thrive. It is death by 1,000 cuts. Our district has placed a strong emphasis on equity and diversity, and while these core values are essential, holding those values without offering opportunity is merely lip service. Diversity and equity must live in the opportunities we offer students. The table has to exist for everyone to bring their chair, or else we've only given our students half the means to achievement. Miller South offers an essential opportunity, and removing it diminishes our district. This opportunity reaches into our high schools, our local colleges, and our community. Miller South feeds into high school programs, including our own Akron School for the Arts, which brings graduates to our local colleges, and these colleges deliver working artists to the Akron community. If we dial down arts programming, the small trickle will eventually grow into a tidal effect in our community. An opportunity eliminated early in the life of our students further reduces diversity and equity far into their futures. Miller South embraces these core values in ways that are not only celebrated, but live in the fabric of the school. Students learn and create with people that do not mirror their own lives. They learn to value equity and diversity through a shared, learned, living experience that reaches from art classrooms to academic settings. experiencing the contributions of individuals in raising a single voice, in producing a play, in the hum of an orchestra, in completing a mural is to understand that the sum is not achievable without every part. Everyone is valued, not just in words, but in actions. All of this points to Miller South's 30-year successful history. Miller South is one of the top 3 schools in the district, according to the Ohio Department of Education. This school has helped shape a Met Opera singer, a state representative, a Broadway performer, and countless others who fill our lives with their talents. Students with a shared experience, steeped in diversity and equity, create communities that reflect those values. Eliminating this program speaks to our district's values. Do we prize sports complexes over education? Do we champion diversity and equity in action, or merely in words? I hope you will consider any reduction in Miller South a non-negotiable. Miller South should remain a contained 4th through 8th grade opportunity for APS students.
Thank you. Joshippin.
Good evening. Thanks for giving me some time to speak. I find myself in an interesting position tonight. I have 2 kids who attend APS, a daughter at Miller South, and a son at STEM Middle School. Both schools are well represented here today, and I urge you to hear what they have to say, because they're bringing excellent points. I've been thrust into the middle of all this because I've recently been hired as the new executive director of Kenmore Neighborhood Alliance. So it's my job here today to advocate for Kenmore. But I wouldn't stand here and tell you something unless I really believed it. So the first thing I want to say is that these are complicated calculations when it comes to long-term planning for the future locations of the various schools. I know a lot of different factors go into those decisions, and they're not easy. What I can say is that the former Kenmore High site is an excellent site for a school, perched above the Kenmore Boulevard Historic Business District, the social, economic, and cultural heart of Kenmore, and also a central location within the city. The core of our mission at the Kenmore Neighborhood Alliance is to revitalize the Kenmore Boulevard Historic District. So we're in the perfect position to make the boulevard a wonderful, enriching, safe space for the youth who attend any school located at the former Kenmore High site. Whatever you decide, I ask that you not disinvest in Kenmore, as has been the case throughout this whole process of building, and in Kenmore's case, not building new schools. Kenmore has suffered for it. It has torn the fabric of the community, and it would be wrong to do it to us again. So whatever you decide, include Kenmore. Don't disinvest. And you know, I have one more thing, just being here tonight and seeing the wonderful turnout from both STEM Middle School and from Miller South. And this is speaking as an individual, not as a representative of Kenmore Neighborhood Alliance. Instead of shrinking Miller South, why not grow it? Why not have a new visual and performing arts school that is 4th through 12th, right? Make the Akron School of the Arts a part in the same building. And what better place than Kenmore, perched above the Kenmore Boulevard Historic Business District, a place where we're building a cultural and an arts and a music center in Akron. So we would be happy to receive you. Thank you.
Thank you. Judith Haver.
I'm an alumni mom with 2 daughters that attended Miller South in 1996 through 2003, and now I have a 5th grade granddaughter. In the morning meeting for 30 years, Miller South has watched performances from peers, professionals, teachers, and heard morning announcements each day. They sing a unique birthday song to each child on their birthday that was written by a beloved choir director. As they come in every morning, they wander around the auditorium to visit friends from every grade. This one event creates a family that's built regardless of age, interest area, race, community, and religion. All the options that you presented will affect that important part of Miller South. The school board has talked about improvements to the old Miller South High School, new buildings moving into existing ones since I was PTA president in the late 1990s, 2000s. We weren't the squeaky wheel, so you put us on the back burner. We accepted that and made it work. Over the last 30 years, parents, students, teachers, and alumni have jumped right in. We updated squeaky auditorium seats, decorated tiles for crumbling walls, purchased a new dance floor, provided pianos and headsets, technologies for better performances, and none of your proposals will allow them to work the formula that has made Miller South a gem for the Akron Public Schools. It seems you've not walked the building, not experienced the school spirit, or seen the performances. You've ignored years of input from teachers, parents, alumni, and kids as what's the best thing for the school. The idea of taking the 4th and 5th graders out is outrageous. The 4th and 5th graders are given the opportunity to experience and explore all of the arts. They're taught how to organize and prioritize, how to be responsible with equipment, how to be a good audience, and more importantly, how to communicate and accept everyone and appreciate what they bring to the table. They look up to the older kids and appreciate what their hard work has brought them to. Likewise, the 7th and 8th graders have an opportunity to be mentors and leaders and examples. They fine-tune their talents in their chosen interest area, and the pressure to conform and act older at that age is greatly reduced when the innocent and youthfulness of the younger kids are brought into the school, not only into the school, but into the performances. If there's any self-consciousness or doubt in the minds of the other kids as they stand in front of their peers, the encouragement and admiration from the younger kids allow their authentic selves to come out. Basically, Miller South needs an auditorium that can be theirs all day. It's the hub. They need multiple visual art rooms, a choir room, a band room, a string room, a dance studio, a piano studio, and a little theater. And if you can't provide that in a building, then let us stay and make the repairs that you've promised us for 30 years. If you cut 40% of Miller South enrollment by eliminating 4th and 5th grades, and you don't provide a comparable facility and its resources, the formula of success that has been developed for 30 years at Miller South will be damaged, and the schools will never be the same.
I go by Addie, but yes, Addie. Yes. Hi, my name is Addie Wetzel. Over 20 years ago, my aunt, a 10-year-old student at the time, also stood in front of the Akron Public Schools superintendent and asked him to make an exception for Miller South. Why? Because Miller South is special. I stand here today asking a similar thing, because Miller South is a special place to me. I came here in the 4th grade and fell in love with it instantly. Miller South was a place I could be myself without getting weird looks in the hallway. I looked up to the 8th graders and my teachers who encouraged me to be unique. No such thing as embarrassed or scared exists in Miller South. At my old school, playing a C scale on the piano was impressive. Now I'm playing harder songs like In the Halls Mountain King. I could barely sing Do Re Mi. Now I sing the national anthem at a real baseball game. Moving Miller South is like taking a fire and putting water on it. If we change Miller South, we would lose the fun of morning meeting, where the entire school is together in the auditorium. We would miss out on things like singing Happy Birthday the Miller South way, and morning performances where we watch our fellow students perform. Some of the things that make Miller South special is the way the teachers use art in almost all of our classes. We do fun projects like the biographical tea, a tea party where we study an important historical figure, then dress up as them with help from the drama department. The fraction quilt project is where we use fractions to find out how many colors per square are in our pieces of art. We find out how it's possible to make art with math. My friends and I all agree it made math so much more fun. I learned due to all my teachers, being unique is okay and accepted. Imagine taking a needle and throwing it into a haystack. Miller South is a needle, so please don't put us in the haystack. As I learned from my amazing teacher, Mrs. Hazlett, and a novel in my language arts class, if it's allowed, I would like to defer my remaining speaking time to anyone who needs it.
Don, do we know what's wrong with the lights? I thought maybe we were late paying the light bill. Excuse me. Right. It's very dramatic there, yeah. Thanks, Addie. We appreciate you. Next, we have Jeanette Lorenich. Okay.
I'm not sure how I'm supposed to follow that, but that's a prime example of a Miller South student. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. My name is Jeanette Lorenich, and I spent the first decade of my teaching career at Miller South for the visual and performing arts, starting in 2000-2001. Once my children were born, I made the decision to resign to be home with them. My children are now in 4th and 6th grade at Miller South, where my husband and I choose to open and enroll them into the district. 2 years ago, I rejoined APS as a substitute teacher, where I have spent many, many days at both Miller South and at the STEM school. Miller South has shown excellence for the last 30 years as a 4th through 8th grade school. Starting at the 4th grade gives the students a foundation for success and prepares them for the high expectations Miller South holds of their stars, both academically and artistically. Students are able to reach a higher potential and hone their talent due to those 2 extra years immersed in the arts. Miller South alumni are currently touring with Broadway, dancing in world-famous companies. They are hosting radio shows, writing books and screenplays, and working as professional artists and musicians. They serve the community as doctors, lawyers, and law enforcement. We have a former student serving in the U.S. Congress, as well as another running for mayor of Akron. And I certainly don't want to forget to mention the countless alumni now serving as teachers, where they have taken what they have learned at Miller South and implemented it into their own classrooms, both in Akron schools and around the world. Miller South has proven time and time again for 30 years that they have figured out a program that not only works, but thrives. We all know state test scores are not an end-all be-all to assess what a child knows, but just a quick peek over 3 decades of Miller South scores will show you that we're doing something right. Yet over my 23-year association with the school, I have seen them have to fight repeatedly, time and time again, to prove themselves worthy. I'm not sure why both STEM and Miller South constantly have to fight for what's right for their students. Both schools should be celebrated, applauded, and rewarded for their success, not left to fight for the remaining scraps, especially when Miller South brings into the money Miller South brings into the district with its high out-of-district open enrollment numbers. 25% of the current 4th grade is open enrolled from outside the district. Both schools deserve their own beautiful building that meet their unique needs. Our students are worthy of modern, updated buildings just like all the other APS students. Each school needs to maintain the school culture that makes them uniquely special. Showcase and reward these 2 successful programs. Don't cut them. Frankly, no matter what you decide building-wise, Miller South parents, staff, students, and alumni will make it home. But most importantly, please don't leave behind some of our stars. Please do not eliminate 4th and 5th grade. And one last thing, Miller South, who are we?
We are stars!
Thank you for your time.
Phil Montgomery.
Good evening. Sorry, I thought I was later on the list, but I appreciate time for the opportunity to come and speak to you all today. I am the father of a fifth grader at the STEM middle school, and an incoming fifth grader from the fourth grade has also made it through the lottery and been accepted. The school itself, it's just fine, right where it is. The program works. The academics there are excellent. We get great state report card grades there in the district, one of the highest, and it's a central location. When we think about all of the open enrollment across the district for the STEM middle school, it is right in the center of the city. It's convenient for busing. It's convenient for experiential learning exercises in the community and free field trips. And when we look at the overall plan that's been presented to the community and to this board, 3 of the 4 plans call for the movement or the removal of the STEM middle school from the National Inventors Hall of Fame, which is in the name. And the program, again, as I mentioned, it works. It's what's going on in the community. The building is exactly what we need. And if we're going to disrupt other parts of the district because schools need to be rebuilt, and we all agree that North High School needs rebuilt. We all agree that Kenmore needs a school. But why move one that doesn't need to be moved? It's not broken. Don't fix it. The other part I want to make sure that I bring up is the timing of this. I hope the Akron Beacon Journal got it wrong when it said the board plans to make a decision by the end of this month. The community's had 1 week to digest this. So I hope that the board is thoughtful in making that decision, and especially when it looks at some of the financial aspects of the proposals, when there are potential bond issuances that may or may not be voted on by the public. And there's also House Bill 1. And the implications of tax levies that the state legislature is reviewing right now. So I think it'd be hard pressed to make a fully baked out educated decision without all of those parts being known. So I thank the board for the time. I really hope that the process will be given the due diligence that it needs for the community to provide further and additional input. I think that I'm glad to hear that there's a revision to the plan that's going to be presented tonight, and I hope after everybody's passionate discussions today that more revisions may be happening as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Melissa Wheeler.
Hi, I'm Melissa Wheeler. I'm a parent of a daughter at STEM as well. She's a 5th grader. I prepared a long speech about keeping 5th grade there, but it sounds like you plan to, so I won't spend most of your time on that. However, I do want to say that it needs to stay in STEM. She has gotten opportunities she would not have gotten in the elementary school. I agree with what Phil just said. It needs to stay in downtown. The ability to go on walking field trips and be very involved with the community partners. It's part of what makes STEM what it is. And I personally support any plan that would put STEM high school with STEM middle to create some sort of like STEM campus where they could share resources and labs and space like that. I don't know what that would look like. But I know it needs to be here in downtown Akron where it's central for all students to get there, as well as to work closely with our community partners. So I hope you, the board, will keep STEM where it is. And ultimately, I just want to say there's nothing wrong with either of these schools or these programs. We should be celebrating them and not trying to change them. So let's leave what's successful, successful, and don't fix what's not broken. Thank you.
Thank you. Danielle C. Williams.
Sorry. Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to speak. Like the two before me, I am also a STEM parent. I'm also the vice president of the PTA, and I know we've sent you some documents, some emails, and we also, like Miller, we started a petition. In 3 days, we got over 800 signatures to support keeping STEM exactly where it is. I won't repeat some of the things that we've previously said, but I will say I am a parent of twins who attend STEM, and they're in the 6th grade. It was a very hard decision to choose STEM because they were in private school from K through 4. But the decision to choose STEM was because I went to Central Howard. It's because it was downtown. It's because it offered the focus of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which my kids excelled at. But most important, it was due to the location. Being at STEM, they are able to take those walks and get those field trips. But also last year, we did something really exciting with the PTA. They had their field day at Lock 3. There's no other school that'll be able to say they can walk down the street and have their field day and enjoy the end of the summer with their friends at Lock 3. But to echo some sentiments said, this is the National Inventors Hall of Fame. A lot of us in this room probably attended National Inventors Hall of Fame when it was a museum before it became a school. But now, with the title that it has, it should stay where it is with STEM. I also agree with the comment to have the the 5 through 12 aspect. With the Morley Health Center going away, it seems like a perfect time. The central fight has been going on almost my entire life. It's not going to go away. So that seems like the ideal time to move the STEM high school next to the middle school, and let's make this a big family like the CLCs that we have all across Akron Public Schools. Lastly, I want to thank you in advance for any emails that you do get from us. I want to thank you in advance for you considering our quest to stay exactly where we are. And I want to implore you to remember, people chose STEM because of this location. We chose it because of what it offers, and we chose it because we knew it would be exactly what our students needed. Thank you.
Emily Dressler.
Hi, thank you. I think I concede most of my time because almost everything I wanted to say has been said. And but one thing I wanted to mention is that people always talk about the resiliency of kids, which is true, of course. They're very resilient. But we can't count on that resiliency to make up for poor decision making. We can't hope that that's the thing that will save them, because that's not fair. It's not up to them. It's up to you. And that's all. Thank you.
Tony Works. Tony Works. TONIWORKS. Okay. Jamie Morris.
Hi, thank you for listening. I am a 5th grade NIF/STEM parent. My son is in 5th grade. And I'm new to Akron. We just moved here in November of 2021. We came from a small town, and our family was very nervous about coming into this big district and what to expect and what are we going to do. And I can say that from day one, we have been amazed and overwhelmed with the NIF/STEM program. And a big part of that is the building and the area where it's located. I'm a former educator, and my husband is an educator, and the two of us have just marveled at this program and talked about just the enrichment that's built within this program is more than my son was receiving in his gifted education program at our previous school. So we are beyond pleased with the move here to Akron Public School, and that's because of the NIF/STEM program, and that's because my kid comes home and builds robots in his spare time now. And this is a kid that I couldn't get to do his homework at his prior school. And again, I think that a huge part of that is the area that it's in, being able to go into the community, being able to walk and go to museums and have these real life sort of experiences, the college being able to coordinate time and services with the school because of its location. The enrichment and the richness of the program comes from where it is located. And I think moving it, changing it, grades, moving it to another location and making it a small program somewhere else is going to dilute that. And I just think it would be a tragedy and very sad for Akron. So I hope that you will keep NIF/STEM where it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith, is it friend?
But it translates.
Okay.
Others have spoke more powerfully about the personal impact of the school. My daughter does go there. It's her first year. She's a 4th grader. So I'll let them do that. I wanted to ask a few questions that have been really beguiling me about this process. One of which is, why would magnet schools be moved further from the center of Akron and potentially to the southern edge of the city limits, making access less equitable? Move away from the growing and overcrowded student population on the north side and make it more difficult for the immigrant families to access these schools? Out of a historically underfunded black neighborhood and into a 75% white neighborhood for a majority minority student population? And that part of this zero-sum game has been getting ignored. You're closing schools. Sherbondi Hill doesn't have another school. So like the idea that like, no offense to Kenmore, but like we have to save Kenmore. Downtown is a neighborhood. Sherbondi Hill is a neighborhood. And this is robbing them of their access to a school. And we've been trying to reckon with what we did to that neighborhood with the Interbelt Project 50 years ago, and at the same time, we're having this conversation. It's really absurd to me. Why would we cut 2 out of 5 grades from one of the only non-failing schools in the district? How does it benefit prospective Kenmore students to have a school that is 1.5 miles closer, but has 40% fewer grades to enroll in? Like, for real, they're gonna have less opportunity to go to Miller South now than if it stayed in the building where it was at. It's like, it's absurd to me. And Mr. Hall, simultaneously running for city council while overseeing and initiating massive and dangerous changes to successful programs like Miller South and the STEM school, trying to absolutely blow up the APS budget with $100 million. Is this a conflict of interest? Is this where your focus is right now? Other than, I don't see the reason for this, other than, as you've mentioned, an unexplained commitment and quote-unquote personal reasons for moving these schools to Kenmore. The rest of the board, there's a lot of turmoil here over the last few years. Some of it's self-created, some of it's the pandemic. You're educated people, you know that kids don't do well with turmoil. They need consistency. They need to slowly and methodically build their programs and show them this. It has been not pleasant in my house for the last couple weeks since this has been announced, and I did not need this. I stopped myself before I swore, at least. So why not focus on and invest in growing the student population on the north side of town? Like, they need a school. Like, that should be the focus of this meeting and all of this long-term things, is to help out the north side district, which is overcrowded. Buildings are trash up there. Those fantastic neighborhood up there, and they need the thing. And my last comment is, like, crown jewels has been used a lot, and I think it's a really poor metaphor. Excuse me, I'm a librarian, so I'm gonna pick on this. Like, jewels are static, diamonds are forever, they say, but this school, the STEM school, Miller South, these are living things. You can kill these. Like, these are fruit-bearing trees in a struggling orchard. Lopping off 40% of the limbs, ripping them out of the ground, and replanting them somewhere else, I don't think that's an intelligent and responsible option. And what I want out of this board, please, is intelligence, responsibility, and care in making decisions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Friend. I appreciate that. I'm going to call out. Next, we're going to go with Celeste Wagner, please.
Good evening. My name is Celeste Wagner. I am a lifelong Akron resident, an alumnus of Ellett High School, a parent of a Miller South 4th grader who has attended APS since kindergarten, and a 21-year music educator in a neighboring district. Before our son started school, we made the conscious decision to stay in APS as we believe in the diversity and the programming options offered here. I recognize that APS is at a crossroads, needing to make difficult decisions for the remaining legacy buildings, including Miller South, that are costly to upkeep and in need of great repairs. However, I fear that the plans proposed result in Miller South becoming collateral damage due to the lack of foresight or understanding or devaluing what the school really is. Furthermore, none of the plans presented truly allow for the program to continue to function as an art school due to the lack of appropriate facilities, including a full auditorium. It is the combination of the philosophy, school culture, and teachers that make it successful, not the building. And a huge part of that is maintaining the 4th and 5th grade students as part of the program. Their experiences are what help to develop the artistic skills and passions of each individual child there, which is why they produce such amazing artists, musicians, dancers, and so on as the kids graduate from their program. 5 years of integrated arts instruction is much different than 3, which is what many of your current building plans propose. Beginning this instruction in 4th grade not only allows for greater depth of instruction in the arts, but also provides a stable environment for students when they do approach the difficult ages of a traditional middle school, avoiding a challenging transition at one of the most pivotal points in a child's social emotional development. The arts teach important life skills such as problem solving, critical thinking, craftsmanship, teamwork, and public speaking, as exemplified in alumnus Amelia Sykes. In the 4th and 5th grade, students work in collaboration on a variety of projects, which builds trust. The schedule allows these grade levels to take additional field trips, which teach them how to behave in public and how to be respectful of each other. They are afforded this in part due to the extended school day compared to their peers in a traditional elementary school. All of this allows for them to become independent learners in 6th through 8th grade. Beyond the intrinsic value in the arts and the SEL benefits that the 4 through 8 structure creates, one could simply look at the decision from a statistical view. When Miller South continually receives the highest scores in the district on standardized tests in grades 4 and 5, why would a decision be made to dismantle a program that is academically successful? Additionally, despite the fact that all families must provide their own transportation, Miller South has among the best attendance rates in the district. Perhaps it would make more sense to model other middle school programs after a program that has achieved high results for 30 years. I ask that the board find an option that would allow Miller South to continue its demonstrated 30-year success model as a 4 through 8 school in a building that allows for their unique morning meetings and provides for the artistic needs of such a program. Finally, as this process moves forward, I would ask for complete transparency in all discussions as to how any option considered directly impacts all schools involved. Thank you for your time.
Okay, we're going to try to fit a few more folks in. Christine Justice.
Yeah. Good evening, Superintendent Outley, President Hall, and distinguished board members. I want to start by saying, you may not know this, but I'm actually the fourth generation of my family to graduate from Kenmore High School. So when we closed that building, it literally broke my heart. And I, as a member of that community, know that we need to put a school back in there. That being said, the STEM school is in the building that was designed for it, and we need to stay where we are. I'm a founding staff member of the NIFSTEM school, and what you may not know is that building was designed by Disney Imagineers that we flew in from Florida and the National Mayor's Hall of Fame Museum. And they met with community members, parents, students, and staff, and they said, what can we do to make a building that's one of a kind for the STEM middle school, because we're the first one in the state of Ohio. They asked us questions like, how can we inspire creativity, ingenuity, inventiveness, and STEM? And our building does. It was designed just for that. Our hallways, you're going to notice it's different than every other building that you've been in because we're a one-of-a-kind place. We have removable walls, furniture, and collaborative spaces. Our science labs are specifically outfitted so that we can teach science in the way that's never been taught before. We have classrooms and labs and all kinds of equipment. For tech, we have a digital fabrication lab, a maker space, and a state-of-the-art esports arena that is still being built right today. Like, we just picked out carpet. We want a building that would have engineering marvels. When you walk into our building, it takes your breath away because you're met by 5 beautiful stories that you look up. And as a 4th grader coming into our building, thinking about going there, they all get the same look of awe on their face when they walk in. We have an invisible elevator that they can see through, and even the wiring was purposely left exposed to inspire engineering and as young as our 4th graders. Our floor, you walk over it every day and you don't notice, it has the Fibonacci sequence laid into the floor tiles to inspire mathematics. Our learners, our 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade learners have worked with actual partners of our building to create spaces that are their own. We have a miniature golf course and an escape room designed and built by Goodyear with 5th graders. Downtown Akron Partnership, Susie Graham, flew in artists from Brazil to actually do an installation in front of our building for all of Akron to enjoy. That was built by 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in collaboration with Brazilian artists. Located downtown, you're going to see STEM all over the place because we become a thriving member of the ecosystem as the rebirth of downtown has occurred. Those colorful crosswalks, that was done by our 8th grade art students. If you go into the library downtown, you're going to see the tween space that was built by 5th graders. Our art museum, just this year, we were down there installing artwork with the art museum. The Civic Theater sold out a few weeks ago because our Chinese students did a display that was wonderful. We work with the University of Akron, and we've been training their students for every year that we've been there. And many of those students don't have cars to drive to Kenmore, but they can walk over to our building, and we've been training them in STEM ideology. We go to the Rubber Ducks game every year. It doesn't cost a bus ride because we can walk there. We work with the zoo, and we've even gone to the courthouse and installed a mural that our 5th and 6th graders created in the courthouse across the street. Moving STEM High School to the Morley Health Center would be fantastic because it would establish us as a true 5 to 12 vision that our founders had. We could take our collaboration for engineering, robotics, and esports to the next level by combining our personnel and our resources. Not to mention, high school STEM students drive to school, and there's barely enough parking for the STEM staff that's currently there in the middle school. But the Morley Health Center would be part of that, so they would be able to park downtown also. Look, Kenmore needs a school there, absolutely. But STEM is in a building that was uniquely designed to offer a one-of-a-kind STEM experience. We can teach STEM anywhere, but we already have a building that lets us do it well. Why would we change that? Thank you.
So unfortunately, that's where we're going to leave it for this evening with regard to address a request to address the board. I think we got 17 people in. I know that some of you are disappointed by that, but we do want to get to Dr. Thompson's conversation and LTOP presentation. So I hope that you'll stick around for that as well. And quite candidly, because we hope that by participating, that it will allow you to help us combat mis and disinformation that is currently out there. A couple of other comments I'll make before we pivot to Dr. Thompson's presentation. You know, there's been, oh, here we go. When the lights go down in the city. Okay, thank you. Any construction that would take place that would house STEM or Miller South would have the full complement of programming that's there. So people talk about auditoriums and dance floors and things like that. Nothing about the plans that we've talked about would entail moving students to buildings that had less amenities than what they currently have. You know, and so that's one thing I want to say as a general comment that we're talking about in our plans. You know, and by the way, that we've not decided on that these would be state-of-the-art facilities. You know, for our performing arts, for our STEM kids. You know, many of you have called out tonight that we've ignored those for too long. Part of this process is really addressing that, right, and bringing our STEM and Miller South performing arts kids into buildings that are state of the art. Also, as well, you know, the senior staff here have been working on these plans for approximately 18 months. Hundreds of hours have gone into it. Hundreds of meetings have gone into it. Back in September, we started a 6-month process where we did collect community feedback, and I would say that was largely poorly attended. So I want to make sure that I address the process component of this, right? So there has been a process. It has not been perfect. I'm grateful to see at this point in time all of you here participating. This is what I wish we could teach civic lessons about this, right? This is what representative government is all about. And speaking of government, I do feel compelled to make 2 more comments. I think it's my civic responsibility to remind us that it's not uncommon for a person to hold one office while running for another. Multiple folks on city council are running for mayor, and we're not accusing them of conflicts of interest either. And last but not least, to my colleagues here, there are 7 of us on the board. I am but 1 vote. So I don't drive an agenda. I don't make decisions for this board. This board makes decisions for itself. We are one body. So as we move forward, and I'd like you to keep that in mind, that we are 7 individuals with our own thoughts, opinions, passions, and dreams as well, just like all of you are individuals as well. So again, my apologies that we were not able to get to everybody on the list tonight. We are meeting next Wednesday again, and so there'll be time to address the board there. Again, if we have a number of folks, I will waive the policy again, to try to get as many of you in that didn't have a chance to speak tonight, that you have a chance to speak next meeting as well. So having said that, I see there's a hand raised there. We don't take questions from the audience during board meetings. I apologize for that. So at this point in time, again, we're going to move to I know his name. I just want to say that heartfelt thank you for the time that you spent to come in and organize tonight. These are emotional decisions for all of us. A lot of us, myself included, are very emotional in thinking about these kinds of decisions, how they impact our kids, because we know that regardless of what we do, nothing is going to be perfect for everybody. And regardless of what we do, not everybody's going to be happy or satisfied. And so that's something that we're going to have to wrestle with too as we move forward. So again, I appreciate your time. I do hope that you'll stay for Dr. Thompson's presentation to help us combat mis and disinformation that's out there, as well as I think his commentary tonight, I think, will address or at least assuage in part some of the concerns that were raised. So without further ado, Dr. Thompson, I will turn things over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Hall, and thank you, Board of Education. And we sincerely are appreciative of the fact that you all are here. I really would. I promise to go as quickly as I can, but I think we can address a lot of the concerns or issues that exist. And I would be remiss to say over the last 6 months that I've been here and the work that we've done administratively and on the board, the focus has always been students first. That is at the forefront of what we're trying to accomplish. And I think when you see this, you'll see how it's a very, very difficult balancing act. And although this group largely represented the Miller South and the STEM program, you saw the range of opinions if you look between the lines of even the people that spoke to the board today. So there's a whole lot of different views on how to make this work, and so we're trying to put out the facts the best that we can. There are some additional options that I will present to you tonight. That is certainly not the limit. Obviously, it's our job administratively to present options to the board, inform the board, and ultimately it's the board's decision on how to move forward and even change some of the options. But we'll look at 5 tonight. So our goal is to fix the challenges that we face. And I think it's important to remember that when this whole building project started, there were 37,000 students in Akron Public Schools. And today there is under 20,000 students in Akron Public Schools. And as a result of that, funds were pulled back Now, that's not just Akron Public Schools, and I want to be very clear, that's Northeast Ohio. You can look at all the schools across Northeast Ohio, and almost all of them are losing student enrollment as our population declines. Over 300,000 people once lived in Akron, and we're at about 195,000 residents now. So there are many changes that have occurred that are beyond the control of the school board or the administration. I just wanted to review quickly, what has that declining student enrollment look like for us as we try to make the best use of our facilities? So in our elementary schools, we have 8,880 students with nearly 13,000 seats available. That's over 4,000 empty seats that are unfunded. The average size of our elementary schools are 350 students. So if you just do simple mathematics, that would tell you that we could, in theory, eliminate 12 elementary schools. Does it stop there? No, it continues on into our middle schools. We have 3,410 middle school students with over 5,000 seats available. That's a difference of 1,637 middle school seats available, which is nearly the equivalent of 3 middle schools. Our high schools are the same. 5,167 students with over 7,500 seats available. So that is an additional challenge to what we face, the board faces, the administration faces. That is also juxtaposed against our financial situation. So this is what you're looking at right now is the 5-year forecast that was submitted in November. In 2027, it projects a carryover of $22 million. I know those are big numbers and they sound like a lot of money, but the budget's a little over $350 million to put that in perspective. Then there are some changes, assumptions that some of these are not assumptions, some of them are facts, and some of them are assumptions. So the negotiated contract is not an assumption. Healthcare forecasting is difficult, but you can see we're forecasting at 10, 8, 7, and 7% increases on healthcare costs. ESSER supplanting, that's the federal money. This is supplanting of $20 million back to the general fund. We have 16 buses right now that are over 15 years old. The state of Ohio says that you should replace your buses after 10 years, and we're still rolling with 16 of them that are over 15 years old. We need to replace those buses. I don't think anyone would argue that we should not fall behind on textbook and curriculum adoptions. And the Fair School Funding Act is also incorporated into this. It's about $2 to $2.5 million a year. So it's reflected in this 5-year forecast. ESSER funds must be spent by September of 24. Those 3 years reflect our negotiated agreement. And you can see that we go from $22 million in cash reserves to $43, almost $44 million deficit. So are there some possible funding options specific towards our programming? And I guess I bring this to your attention, school board, as you look through the numbers as a possible option. You've all heard of bond issues. There's also permanent improvement levies. 1.5 mils is a fairly low amount for a tax increase. It is a tax increase that would have to be voted, but it generates approximately $4.2 million. So as we go through the options, keep in the back of your mind that there is a potential funding stream available to us if the community would support that initiative. So some of the unchangeable facts that I heard some people say, just leave it alone. Don't mess with success. It's not an option, folks, and here's why. Our lease at Central Howard ends this summer. We may be able to get an extension, But STEM high school must go somewhere. It must go somewhere. I'm not saying where, I'm saying it must go somewhere. Just stay at Miller South. Miller South is not an option. We need $26 million in repairs just to keep it warm, safe, and dry. That is not pretty. That's just warm, safe, and dry. I would submit to you, to the board, that a $26 million investment in that building would be foolish. North High School needs $50 million just to keep it warm, safe, and dry. And the North Cluster is the only cluster in the city that is growing. So this comes from the Akron Public Schools report on feasibility of facility improvements. It's page 18. That is where I'm pulling those numbers from in your 3-ring notebook binder. This was submitted to the Akron Public School Board in response to resolution number 22-060, July 11th, 2022. These aren't my made-up numbers. These are Hammond Construction assessments of our facilities. So those are 3 real challenges the school board is faced with, and there is no easy solution. Keep in mind our deficit as well. So this is a fairly new document for you, school board. This I obtained on Friday. This is a second look at the cost of construction. So the numbers are important. 800 student building is approximately $46 million. 900 students is $51 million. 1,000 students is $57 million. That does not include demo of the Kenmore building, which is an additional $3 million. Then if you look below, there was a lot of talk, and I completely concur, and I believe the board will completely concur, that whatever we build has to meet the needs of our students. Not just meet their needs, but be an upgrade. Certainly a new construction can offer that. So there are some options along the bottom that give you an idea of what that could look like as you make your decision making. So how are these programs currently enroll, or what does enrollment currently look like? So at Miller South, most of you know, as parents that have students that attend or students who did attend at one point, 4th and 5th grade allows 75 students in, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade 115 for a total of 495 students. NIF STEM is 108 across the board for 432. So that's a total of 927 students that we're considering at maximum capacity are allowable at this point. So what does that look like in actual enrollment? So at Miller South, of the 495 seats available, there are 360 students who sit in those seats. NIF STEM, there are 432 seats available, 410 students currently occupy those seats. And then across the bottom, I've added Pfeiffer for your review. There are 215 students currently enrolled in Pfeiffer Elementary School. So if you look at it on the high end, the required seats are 1,227 seats. There are actually 987 bodies in those 3 schools currently. So when looking at a maximum number plus 4th and 5th grades, we would need to construct for roughly 1,300 students, 154,000 square feet. That's almost $70 million. If that were in one building, for example, at the Kenmore campus. Based on current enrollment, if it were built that way, that would be 1,000 students and would be roughly $60 million with a new build and a demo of the current Kenmore building. So maximum capacity versus projected enrollment. What you're looking at here is why was the thought given, and I understand your passion, and I don't think anyone's going to argue the viability of 4th and 5th grades, but why was that introduced? Well, you can see how it drives the numbers down, and finances are a reality in this project. Again, the board will make that decision, but it's incumbent upon me to show it to them. So maximum grades, if we're 6 through 8, would drop to about a $60 million build. If it were based on current students, it would be roughly $50 million. I'll put this back up at the end for you to look at as you discuss options, but I think most of all the options are up here with dollar figures, whether that's bringing money back in or expending funds. The uncomfortable reality of limiting the programs 6 through 8 is there's a significant savings engaged in that as well, and that's reflected here. So option 1 that was presented to the board is to close legacy buildings. Just before we even go into legacy buildings, a reminder again in your 3-ring notebook binder, our total cost of our legacy buildings just to keep them warm, safe, and dry, which is actually old information now, it's a year old, is $179 million. Just to keep them warm, safe, and dry. Not pretty, warm, safe, and dry. So this plan calls for Firestone Park Elementary to close, relocate Pfeiffer Elementary School, relocate Miller South, close the Ott building and relocate those programs, construct a new North High School, grades 9 through 12, redistrict a portion of the North Cluster. Why is that? Because building a new high school does not solve for our overcrowding challenges that exist in the North Cluster. Move all East Cluster 6th graders to East CLC. Construct a new Kenmore School, grades K through 8. That would be the option that does not resonate well with our group here tonight, which I understand, but relocate the Performing Arts School 6 through 8 in a new building, the STEM 6 through 8, and relocate Pfeiffer. I do want to be very clear, when this building is built, or if it is built and it's configured this way, please note that those 2 schools would be very separated. There would be some shared space for cost effectiveness, but one side of the building would not interact with the other side of the building. Open new preschool programs in CLCs where building space is available, and you've all seen this across all of them. It's construct a new athletic complex. Now, what I want you to understand about that and why that dollar amount. First of all, Garfield High School, when we talk about equity, Garfield High School, and I've never seen a high school ever in my career have a high school with no athletic facilities. There are no athletic facilities, external athletic facilities at Garfield High School. There's a 60-yard practice football field, soccer field, etc. But again, that aside, that's the 004 LFI, locally funded initiative. It's $15 million left over from the original $800 million project. It's co-owned by the city and by the school district. So the goal is to, instead of fighting over who controls those funds and who actually those funds should go to, rather to solve a problem for us and a problem for the city. The city feels like, I don't want to speak for the city, but our conversations are that they have and feel like there's a need for athletic facilities in the city as well, and it's a way we can jointly collaborate, and there's not many things we can do with those funds without collaboration. So what's the budget on that? All those closures and deferred maintenance is roughly $2,140,000 in savings. The construction of the new building would be an estimated $58 million, $15 million for the athletic complex, $65 million for a new north. That's $138 million. We've talked about certificates of participation. For you in the audience, basically what that is, think of it as a mortgage, which is essentially what it is. It's a low-interest mortgage that the school district could take out for $100 million on this plan. A $5 million grant, those LFI funds that I just spoke of, $20 million from ESSER. That's $140 million in total funds available with $2 million in contingency. That's $6,513,623 mortgage payment per year. Less our savings of $2,140,000. That's $4.3 million, almost $4.4 million in the red each year on those payments. So what is that financial impact? Assuming the $100 million COPS and all the things we talked about previously, you can see what it does to our 5-year forecast. 26 goes red, and 27 goes from $43 million deficit to a $60 million deficit. Option 1B has been presented to the board as well, but it's closure of Firestone Park, again, relocating Pfeiffer, relocating Miller South and Ott, construct a north campus, 6 through 12. And why would that be beneficial? If it could be done, it would solve the overcrowding issues that exist in the north cluster because we could convert Jennings Middle School into an elementary school. In this particular option, you will not see those funds being loaned out, but rather going to the community and seeking a bond issue to pay for that construction cost. Redistrict portion of the north cluster because of the length of time it would take to have that construction completed. And then again, the 6th graders, construct a new Kenmore, which you've seen before, the 6-8. And then the CLCs, the athletic complex. What does that look like budgetarily? It's a $2.1 million in deferred maintenance and staffing reductions. Construction is $58 million for the new building. The athletic complex, the north campus, has no number associated with it because we would seek a bond issue to cover those costs, so there's no impact on the general fund. That's a $73 million project with $35 million in certificates of participation, $5 million grant, $15 million LFI, $20 million ESSER, $78 million with $2 million in contingency. That's $2.2 million a year in debt schedule with offset by $2.1 million in reductions. That's $146,000 negative number on our 5-year forecast, which essentially $146,000 on a $350 million budget. It's got to be 0.000 something. It would take us from 43.9 to 44.6. So essentially, option 1B does not have a financial impact. Option 1C is new. Closing the legacy buildings of Firestone Park, relocate Pfeiffer Elementary, relocate Miller South. You've seen this. That's the same as it has been. Construct a new North Campus, 9-12. Right initially, redistrict part of the North Cluster. That still would be required in this plan. Move the 6th graders. But this is the one that I think at least this group of community residents would like to see. Relocate the Performing Arts Program 4 through 8 and relocate STEM Middle School 5 through 8 and relocate Pfeiffer Elementary students to Kenmore. I have had in my career the experience of building a STEM school and a performing arts school, we can do this in a way that would blow away anything that Miller South has to offer. I'll just leave it at that. And I think you would be excited to see what it could look like and what it could offer students. Open the preschool programs, the construction of the athletic facilities. It's less in deferred staffing reductions because we're not eliminating those 4th and 5th grade or 5th grade programs that currently exist. Construction cost goes up to $68 million because it's larger, that's why. $15 million in athletic complex, $65 million for the North Campus. That's a $148 million build out. That would require $100 million in COPS, $5 million in grants, $15 million in LFI, $30 million in ESSER funds, which will not make our academic side of the house smile. That's $78 million, $2 million in contingency, $6.5 million mortgage payment, $1.5 million in deferred maintenance and staffing. It's nearly $5 million a year. You know it's going to be a major financial impact. Almost $2 million deficit in 26 and a $63 million deficit in 27. So you begin to understand and see the complexity of solving for this problem. Option 2, this was from our community task force. The closures of the building are pretty consistent. This was to construct a new North Campus 612, transition Jennings CLC, which would solve our overcrowding issue, relocate the 4-8 performing arts school to either Garfield or Buchtel, move all East 6th graders to ECLC, renovate the Morley building, which some folks talked about, creating that campus, open new CLC elementary buildings, construct the athletic complexes, and again, deferred maintenance and staffing reductions are a little higher. The Morley building is $20 million. The athletic complex, $15 million. The North Campus at $85 million. It's $120 million. It's an $85 million COPS deal. $5 million in grants, $15 million in LFI, $20 million in ESSER. That's $125 million with $5 million in contingency, $6 million a year, less our savings. That's $4 million a year hit on the general fund. Again, you can see what it looks like, $43 million to $59 million deficit. Option 3 is a savings option. It's to close the highest number of building closures: Ott, Miller South, Firestone, Pfeiffer, Stewart, and Essex. Construct a new North 612 campus. Again, you'll see that it is deferred in terms of paying for it with a bond issue if it were to pass. Repurpose 2 existing elementary schools. Relocate the performing arts program to one of them and relocate the STEM middle school to another. In each one of these, it's important to note that the displaced students in a new building would be middle school when it comes to STEM students. Why? Because it's incumbent upon us to keep our high schoolers need to be near the UA campus because they take college courses. Middle school students don't. Not that there aren't benefits to them being downtown and on a centralized campus. No one's suggesting that it's not. But if one has to move away, it makes a lot more sense to keep the high schoolers near the UA campus and downtown than it would the middle school students. redistrict a portion of the North Cluster, move the sixth graders, open preschool programs, and construct a new athletic complex, and transfer ownership of the Kenmore building to the city of Akron to repurpose as they deem appropriate. So what does that do for us? It's our highest savings in terms of deferred maintenance and staffing at a little over $3 million. North High School is funded with a bond issue, no impact on general fund. The athletic complex, that LFI money is not in our general fund. So it's a total budget of $15 million paid for by those LFI funds, and it is a savings of $3 million a year for the district. And it takes our deficit from $44 million to $31 million. It's also important to note that as we're planning these building projects, it's very clear we're levy eminent as well. Option 4 is a new option. It's close legacy buildings and relocate to a low enrollment school, Miller South, Firestone Park, Pfeiffer, Stewart, and Essex. Construct a new North Campus, 612. Repurpose 2 existing elementary schools and relocate the OP programs there. Relocate the STEM program, STEM middle school grades 5 through 8 into one of our existing CLCs. Construct a new Kenmore school, grades K through 8. Relocate the performing arts program 4 through 8 there. Relocate the Pfeiffer elementary students to Kenmore. How does this save money? It reduces the required square footage. Convert Jennings to an elementary school. Convert NIST middle school to high school. Whoops, I'm not sure what happened there. Move all the sixth graders. Open the preschool programs. Construct an athletic facility. That's a savings of $2.2 million a year. $50 million, so the price tag comes down on the new building. $15 million for the athletic complex, $85 million for North. That's $150 million, which puts us back to a $100 million COPS deal. $5 million for the grants, $15 million for the city LFI funds, $25 million in ESSER. That's $150 million. There's no contingency money other than what's currently baked into the $150 million. That's $6.5 million, with $2.2 million in deferred maintenance and staffing reductions, $4.2 million a year mortgage. So what's the impact? It's a $43 million deficit in 26, which I'm sure we could easily rectify, but a $61 million deficit in 27. So I can tell you just strictly my professional opinion on at least the funding part of it. When we start climbing high on those COPS deals, it's going to make it very, very difficult to keep our head above water financially. So I know you're in an incredibly difficult position, incredibly difficult. How do we address the three major issues that we currently have? Our facilities expert, Rob Boxler, tells me every day that he doesn't know how much longer we can Band-Aid Miller South. All the heating and piping is in concrete, baked in the hallways. North is the same way, forced heat through the pipes that are in the walls. We know we have eminent needs across the district in those buildings, which makes it incredibly difficult to make the right decision. But we also, I think, ultimately have to make sure that we're not going to end up making significant cuts into our academic programming. Questions?
I'm sorry, the questions are for the board members. I beg your pardon, sorry about that. Not to the audience. Yeah, sorry. So do any of you have any questions? Yes, Ms. Jackson.
One of the questions I have, when you talked about the construction of the building and then the split use of certain parts of the facility, but that in general they would be completely separate. Because someone in the crowd may mention that they need all-day access to an auditorium. So what would that look like? What are the shared spaces that you are mentioning?
Yeah. So typically, most elementary schools don't have auditoriums. So the auditorium could be built in such a way that it was much more accessible on the performing arts side than it would be on the elementary side. That's not to say that the elementary couldn't use it for some kind of presentation in the evening, but the primary user of a theater or a black box, there's some different options that could potentially exist. A black box is a really cool idea as well, but would be for the performing arts program.
My other question is just for IDIS, because I know you guys spent some time on this where I was not present and before my time on the board as well. So the idea, was it ever consideration when they're talking about campuses? Because I also heard that in the crowd too, whereas it would be a performing arts campus 4 through 12, it would be a STEAM campus, and considerations of how that may drive enrollment and thence bring more dollars into the district if it was more offerings in those specialty schools. Was that ever considered or processed?
I think primarily the reason that it's been a 3-8 program, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, is that Firestone serves as the high school performing arts program and has a pretty significant investment in Firestone and an incredible theater. And so that is part of our programming that exists and options that exist for our students already. So we would be duplicating programs.
Dr. Akbar?
Yes, I have questions about the math here. Just with the fourth option that I put forward, and it might be option 4B, but as far as the North Campus, the thought was that we would see what the difference is having it a high school, and then also another option would be if it was 6 through 12.
Right.
And so right now it's budgeted just for the high school, but it takes $20 million away if it's just it has it for high school and middle school, but it takes $20 million away if it's just the high school. And so that's one point I wanted to mention. I know what you said about the athletic complex. If that's what needs to happen, that's fine. One of the thoughts that I had is it would be actually more preferred if we could use that $15 million in either the north building or the building in Kenmore, and to put forward to the community after maybe potentially seeking support from the Cleveland Guardians or Cleveland Cavs and the Cleveland Browns, and then putting that forward to the community for support, since it's a much lower amount, than to use the LFI funds for athletic facility. I think that's more likely to pass than putting up a fund for one school in one part of the city, which is a much higher, probably 3 times the price tag. So that's the other thing. And when I do the math, if you look at the potential funding sources, I think that we could look at reducing that from 150 to 130, that gives an opportunity, not saying we have to do it, but just as an option to increase the ESSER funds to $40 million. And then that would reduce the COPS down to $70 million. So that would give us an opportunity to potentially do something different, potentially there. So I wanted to just offer that based off what I'm seeing, and really ask how possible does that sound? And maybe you can't answer that right now, which is fine.
Well, I'll answer what I feel comfortable answering. Obviously, the difference between a 912 and a 612 is you're right. It's $20 million estimated difference between the two. In terms of ESSER funds, that's a very difficult topic because some of those ESSER funds, of course, are tied to people who are employed in our district currently. So that's certainly a consideration. And right now, I believe we've cleared $20 million, is my correct, Mary? So that's where we currently stand. I'm not sure that we can get to $40 million, but I couldn't answer that question, at least not right now.
Okay, and then, I'm sorry.
No, please go. Please.
Sorry. And then my other question has to do with what I heard today. I haven't looked into this or put any of this together, so I know we won't having estimates today, but hearing the thoughts around the Morley building, which cost $20 million, that basically would be the same plan without the middle school at North. And also would require, instead of repurposing 2 elementary schools, it would repurpose 1. Not saying that we would have to do that, but that might be, just because we heard that today, it might be good to run the numbers and see if my quick math, I'm trying to do it over here, is accurate. But then also to just show that, that's a option. I think that at least what I heard today, that they want us to consider. I think it's helpful if we had that in front of us to at least consider it as one of our possible routes. I do think at the end of the day, maybe that meeting next Monday or the meeting after that, at some point we do need to start reducing the number of options. But right now I do think that we should look and see, are there any other options that we haven't explored?
I would be remiss if I didn't mention the need not to rush this decision, but yet at the same time make a decision. Is I'm currently holding off to the best that I can about $5 million in work and legacy buildings, with $15 million on legacy building work in the near horizon. So that is why, and also knowing that, again, I would say Miller South is the most critical building in terms of being able to keep the heat running in that facility. I don't know how many winters we have left in that building, and you're looking at least 2 to 3 years in planning, construction, completion, et cetera, et cetera. So that is why there is this somewhat of a sense of urgency to make a decision. And although the community might not, as you mentioned previously, Dr. Hall, that this might be new to them, it's not new to the administration and the board.
Yeah. Well, also the ESSER funds expire to September of 2024.
September of 24.
Yeah. Other questions from board members? Mr. Alexander.
This is a lot. Everybody knows this is a lot. I mean, my head is spinning again. I'm looking at this again and again, and I'm still not clear on all of it. But I was looking at, when we talked about moving Jennings out of Jennings Middle School to North and having a 6 through 12, explain to me again, what are we doing with those, with the student, where are we putting students in Jennings? And then once we put the students in Jennings, where you got Finley, you have Harris Jackson, you have Forest Hill. What are we doing with those schools? Or are those kids going to be going into Jennings too? If so, what are those 3 schools going to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're fortunate that we could, you hear a term often when school districts are building, which Akron has a lot of experience with, swing space. You'll hear that word, swing space. Where do you swing these kids while construction's being completed? We're fortunate that we have plans we believe we can lay over North High School. We could rebuild North High School without emptying the building. And when the new building is complete, tear the old one down. So that really gives us a huge benefit. But what would essentially happen is that would be constructed, let's say it's a 612 campus, that would be constructed, and then Jennings would be an elementary school, converted into an elementary school, and where we have the overcrowding in the other 3 elementary schools, we'd have to redistrict, but everyone would stay inside the North Cluster. No student in the North Cluster would have to leave. They might be redistricted, for example, from one building to another, from one elementary. They would certainly be some kids redistrict, but I think it's, especially when you consider the population that we serve in the North Cluster, the idea of keeping North Cluster kids together is a compelling reason to make a decision that would allow for that.
Okay, so we're saying 6 through 12?
On the high school campus,
right.
Or on the current high school
Right.
campus.
So that's 6 through 12, and then we still have the elementary schools, and then we move some of them into Jennings. That would give us even more space.
In the other 3, correct.
In the other 3, but Jennings is a nice sized school for a middle school.
Yeah.
We still have room in Jennings as well, correct?
You know, one of the things we don't know currently, if you look at all the clusters, we have declining student enrollment anywhere from 4% to nearly 20% in other clusters, while simultaneously the North Cluster is growing at 10% per year. We don't know if that's going to continue. That's really difficult. Birth rates are low in the North Cluster, just like they are across the whole city, but the immigration is, of course, what's driving our student enrollment gains in the North Cluster. So that is difficult even for the experts to project.
Okay, I guess I'm thinking too, when we're moving the 6th grade up and we move some of those elementary kids into Jennings would still have a little more room for growth because it wouldn't fill it to capacity.
That's for certain.
And so that, I think that's kind of a good thing. But also, if we are having a declining enrollment and enrollment doesn't go up, we're still in a predicament that we're in some of these other schools by having low enrollment in Jennings at that point in time.
Right.
Correct?
Right. Right, and that's
Okay.
why you see multiple plans that just call for a 912 and not a 612.
Okay. And then my last comment, I guess, question. This is kind of difficult for me to read, to see, because it is put together in certain pieces, but it'd be easier for me if I saw this is the North Cluster and here's all the moving parts. Here's Kenmore maybe and all the moving parts. It's on paper here, but to see it on like a map figure is kind of a little more visual, and you can see it a little better. Yeah, I think that might be even better for even people in the audience too, because they can get a chance to see, because seeing it on paper like this is good, but it's kind of hard to visualize and see, because I'm drawing and writing notes and so forth, and then as I'm going, I'm checking off because some of the things are being answered, but it's still difficult to see it this way.
Yeah. And if you would like, I'm sure Mary and I can sit down and work through it with any board member who wants to sit down with us to go through it one on two, or however, 3 of us working together, however you want to describe it.
We want to make sure we make a good decision. I know this is kind of somewhat quick, but it's a little bit of time, but still somewhat quick. But I want to make sure we all make a good decision, because it's going to be a decision when we make it, it's done and over and done with. And once we start, we can't go back.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. This will probably be perhaps one of the most important decisions a school board has made in quite some time in Akron Public Schools.
Ms. Autry.
Thank you. And so just kind of piggybacking on that, I just wanted to, we mentioned that there's 12 elementaries that are basically under-enrolled. So as we're making these decisions as well, I mean, it's affecting our whole district. And so when we look at all of these elementaries, these new CLCs, you know, we have to solve for that too, because wouldn't it be a shame to lose one of these CLCs or more as we're making these decisions? So I just, you know, and I just want to also say that I am a parent of 2 students who went to Miller South. And so I'm aware of the importance of arts, and I think everyone on this board is as well. So, but we have to think of the future longevity of the entire district as well. And so we have 12 elementaries that are at risk, that are under-enrolled right now. So we have to also solve for that. And I would even argue that every one of our elementaries deserves the arts as well.
Mr. Alexander.
I'm sorry, I forgot to ask this here, and I know this is not going to be good with all my fellow athletes because I'm an ex-athlete, but is it possible to, when we're looking at this facility, to kind of delay it possibly for the facilities and build portions along the way, but move it down the road a little further? I know Garfield doesn't have a football field, and that's something I advocated for a long time ago because we didn't have one constructed in the plans at all, but we did get the 60-yard field. But is it possible to maybe delay some of the planning of the athletic facilities so we can make sure that the schools are taken care of and then move on with the athletic facility? And we could also possibly, as Dr. Akbar stated, maybe get some other entities to maybe give us some monies to help with the athletic facility too. And if we do, then that might help us, and maybe we can maybe push that athletic facility at the time frame that we want to move it on.
The superintendent and I believe we have it on our calendar to meet with the mayor, and I believe the school board does as well. So after that meeting, I'll have a better sense, or we'll have a better sense of what our options might be as it relates to those LFI funds.
Mr. Alexander? Okay.
And don't forget what Dr. Akbar was saying too about maybe looking at some of the other entities, like he said, the Browns, some of those other athletic teams and so forth, who could possibly give. I mean, we might look at Nike or some of those places too. You know, don't forget about all of them. All right, thank you.
Dr. Akbar?
Yes, and to that point, Mr. Alexander mentioned another thing. It actually came from something I know you did in your past district. You know, in where Roswell Kent currently is actually not that far from the Boys and Girls Club and not that far from the YMCA, both in older buildings and facilities. That might be a good conversation to start with one or both of those entities as well. And if it's possible to have a sports facility that's kind of conjoined with one of those, which would reduce the costs. So that's another potential opportunity, and I'm not sure if they're interested or even they have plans, but just thinking about that community and what's there, that just I'm trying to look under every rock to make sure that we do what we can. And so that leads me to my other question, which has nothing to do with the athletic facility. I'm interested in learning about the new building. If we only put Pfeiffer and Miller South in there, currently Pfeiffer has 215 students, and Miller South had 360, which totals 575. The options for capacity that you showed us was 800 and 1,000. To me, it makes more sense, knowing the way our enrollment is going, to not build a school with 300 empty seats, but instead to build one maybe closer to 650 or 700, which would reduce that cost for that new building. Instead of $50 million, maybe closer to $40 million. So I'm thinking that that's something that we should consider as well, as Ms. Autry so eloquently and perfectly spot on put it, that we have a lot of elementary schools with low capacity. This weekend, one of the fun tasks I had was looking, thank you to Deborah Folk, at all of our elementary and middle school buildings and their capacities and overlaying them with our needs. And I identified 4 elementary schools that we could potentially repurpose and still save a few other elementary schools from potentially being taken over if they ever wanted to invoke that House bill law that any of the charter schools wanted to. And it wouldn't be that far. One of the challenges we have with Pifer, and the reason why I think that it would be a travesty to close Pifer altogether, is there's literally no other elementary school in that area. And so not building another school in that area, elementary school in that area, would be a travesty. And I think that would further do harm in that community. So that's one of the things that I'm thinking about. I know that when we think about what a school means to a community, it really is the heartbeat of that community. And so these conversations, I'll tell you, for me personally, isn't taken lightly, which is why I wanted to do the overlay of the entire district to say, at any point, unbeknownst to any of us, one of our schools or multiple of our schools could be at risk. So when thinking about our long-term planning, we have to think about that and try to save our newer buildings. These are brand new buildings, and so it makes sense to me to figure out how to repurpose some of our brand new buildings, even so much so I use Google Earth to see how much land is around the building if we needed to potentially add to it. Now, I don't know any egress rules or anything like that, but that's how serious I took this process and am taking this process, because I know that whatever decision we make, it's going to hurt someone, and someone's not going to like it. And we have to do what's best in our long-term and longevity of the district and to sustain the district over time. So with that being said, the smaller school, I think, will be something to consider. But also, when I looked at the price for the 6th to 12th school in North, that also looked like it was inflated by maybe $15 million, potentially with more than 250 students potentially added based off the current capacity of Jennings and the current capacity of North. So again, these are the math that I'm doing based off the capacity not the capacities, the current amount of students in the building, not the capacity. So those are two different things. So if you use the current number of students in those buildings, I do think that even the new North facility that, say, 6 through 12 could be reduced, built a little smaller as well, if you're using the current student attendance numbers.
Well, we currently have 910 high school students at North High School, and we have just a little over 700 at Jennings. So we are somewhere around 16 or 1,700 students, and at least at this current state, still growing. I'm trying to move back to the. It's probably a much more efficient way to do this. So, because I don't think, if anything, I think those numbers could potentially be low, because we're looking at 1,000 students at $57 million. So 1,700 students $85 million might be on the light side, potentially. Construction costs are going up at alarming rates. So they built this in for us, but just 2 years ago, buildings were built, brand new buildings were being built for about $200 a square foot. And now we're seeing projections of $395, $69 per square foot. So it's a different game. This is probably not the time you want to build in an economic perspective, but it is the time we find ourselves in. But I don't think $85 million would be light.
Okay. Other questions from board members? Ms. Jackson.
I'm sorry, but so what I'm curious about when we look at this funding, because we know that areas such as STEM is like highly funded and desired, like on a federal level, and it's even private corporations. So I'm just wondering, when we look at money and funding for this, how rigorous was the process as far as looking at money that could be specifically earmarked for these specific programs? Like, for instance, STEM, and looking at the population, how many female students do we have in STEM? Because it's a big move federally for girls in STEM. Like, what's the process here that we research those type of grants, or even in the arts? I know, what was her name? Saving the Music. I know we had like grants like that, but just securing specific large ticketed federal grants or even foundational grants that supports this type of programming, just specifically. Not to take away from the other schools that need arts, but I just think someone even made mention of growing programming. That if you have people driving into the district, that brings money to district, that if it grows, even if it's on the 4th through 8th side. Because I know these are other options, and you said we need to consolidate options, but as an educator, when they boast academic success, it just seems like you don't want to lose that type of demographic and that type of success for your district. I mean, again, just the process, because I know it's a lot of options, and people, I know it seems like, okay, we have to get to this, and I get all that, but this is lives, this is very significant, this is student finding purpose. I really liked how Addie addressed the issue as far as what her school experience has meant to her and how she's been able to thrive, and I think about, could we increase Addie by, another 50 kids?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The funding piece, quite frankly, at least I would say I've been primarily consumed between safety and security and LTOP is where my focus has been over the last 6 months. And while I'm doing that, Deborah Folk, I'm very fortunate to have her as the executive director of business affairs, because she's keeping the house running. And this takes a lot more time than maybe it looks like on a piece of paper. So I don't offer that as an excuse. We recently received a $650,000 grant for safety and security. These grants are very, very time consuming. Construction's typically a hard grant to find to build construction. Programming is different, but construction is generally not something that's funded typically. So, but we will certainly explore every option that we can possibly explore. Partnerships is probably the most viable option. They exist. When you can benefit, as Dr. Akbar mentioned, the YMCA or some other entity, you can certainly drive down your construction costs by combining efforts. So we are currently exploring that and trying to overturn every rock we can while still solving for problems that have been plaguing the district. These aren't new problems. These are old problems. And we need to resolve them at some point or another.
Thank you for that. And do we have people in the district and central office that focus on grants, Superintendent?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Okay, that's.
We do.
I'll follow up with Megan Mannion. She's our lead for the district.
Thanks, Ms. Jackson. So before I make my comments, I just want to say, for those of you that stayed the entire time, that we appreciate it. And what you've heard here is multiple board members expressing multiple points of view. See, I told you, we don't all have one brain, okay? So we do have different opinions. And you've seen that on display tonight in a very public and transparent conversation that took place in front of all of you. So to add my comments to it, a couple of things really have become crystal clear in this process. One, continuing to fund legacy buildings is just not sustainable, and it just shouldn't be on the table. Number two, we talk about the empty spaces that would be in a larger building that would house Miller South and possibly STEM, right? But the way I look at it is that if you build that building the right way, the Miller South building, right, in the right way, that becomes a building with programming and facilities that attracts kids, not just from Akron, but also becomes it becomes a building that exerts an even stronger pull on kids outside the district. So from my standpoint, with more students is more funding for the district, right? So to me, it's not a problem to build a building like a Miller South that would have additional capacity that may be untapped to start, because the plan is you grow that capacity, right? And then ultimately on that mortgage note, Dr. Thompson, with the additional students that we would hope would choose Miller South from both internally and externally, right? You would hope that additional funding helps to contribute towards paying at least part of the mortgage. I also think as well that I would advocate strongly for this board to support options that keep 4th and 5th grade at Miller South and keep 5th grade at the STEM school. Because again, there has been a lot of research that has been shared with me, a lot of letters. I've spent most of the last 4 days combing through all of it. So those of you that took the time to send it, thank you. I appreciate it. It was very informative. And so from my standpoint, I would like this board to, insofar as I have one vote and I maybe have a modicum of influence, I would like us to consider options that would retain 4 and 5 at Miller South. I'm okay with the excess capacity. And one thing that we haven't talked a lot about tonight is, listen, I'm an advocate of building a new building. However, if there's another option to renovate the existing Kenmore building, we know that there's a lot of space in that Kenmore building. The question becomes, could we renovate it in such a way that it has all the programming and the amenities that a brand new school would have? And the answer is probably not, just based upon how the Kenmore building is constructed, which means we're back around to a new building, right? And then a couple last comments here, and then I'll open back up in case somebody has any final comments. I spent a lot of time, I know much has been made of the time I spent in Kenmore. I spent a lot of time in Firestone Park too. And going to those, I've been a regular attendee at Firestone Park, which is Ward 7, more meetings going back a couple of years, and have had a lot of conversations with former administrators here as well. And I know that the athletic complex that would be at Roswell Kent, the completion of that is from the intel that I've gathered, is just keeping a promise that we haven't kept to that community. So I would respectfully ask my colleagues to consider supporting using those LFI funds to support the athletic complex at Roswell Kent. The ESSER funds, part of the reason why we're talking about this now and why there is a sense of urgency is those ESSER dollars expire in September 2024. So those dollars must be spent, not planned to spend them, but must be actually spent by September 2024. And as you all know, those of you who are engaged in any kind of construction project, whether it be home improvement or other, landscaping even, right? there's a lengthy lead time to get work done. And so that's part of the reason why we're working to get, why there's a sense of urgency here, because we want to have access to the ESSER dollars to use in support of the building projects that we've talked about tonight. And so you figure we're already about 18, 19 months out from September of 2024. And so we're rapidly approaching that moment where we won't be able to spend the dollars and time towards building. So, those are, I'm all about continuing to think about other options. But I also want to recognize that I also don't want the perfect to become the enemy of the good. I don't think that there's a perfect solution out there that will make everybody in this room or in the community happy. So how do we get to a solution that is a good solution that benefits the most, the most kids and families without causing irreversible, deleterious harm to other families in this community? So those are my comments. And are there any last comments from members of the board? Dr. Akbar.
Yes, thank you. First, I appreciate your comments, Dr. Hall. I want to echo them. I think that even in the option that I put forward, at no point was it ever considered to reconstruct Miller South's programming or grades that go into it, or STEM. It was, how do we find a home for both of those based off how it's currently constructed? I think that reducing it, minimizing it, or modifying any of those schools' programming would be a disservice to this process and to this community. I also appreciate your comment, Dr. Hall, around the LFI funds. The one thing I will submit to you is that for me, I see this and I say to myself, how can we do it all? And the answer continues to come back to me is that likely we can't do everything. So as a 17-year educator, I will tell you, I love sports. I know the value that it adds to a young person's life. But if we could use those $15 million for a building to support the programming that sustains and carries forward Miller South, for example, for years to come, I would rather use it for that and find more creative options to fund the athletic facility. And that's me saying this as an educator, and that's my thought. That doesn't take away from the need for having athletic facilities in the Garfield cluster or for Garfield High School or CLC. There's clearly a need. Me, of all people, I talk about equity all the time because it's not just a talking point, it's a way of life for me. And, I know that I had this conversation before I joined the board so many times with Ms. Autry about the inequitable way that Bookdale was rebuilt. And how that affected the fields and the sports for that school. And shout out to them for being state basketball championship. So I want to end by saying I don't want anyone to misconstrue my comments around using LFI for one of our building projects to mean I don't support athletics. That's further from the truth. I will always support anything that's a value added to our students. Personally, if I were to prioritize value added, I would say using ESSER funds and LFI funds for buildings that will sustain itself long past the time that we are able to use it is a better or higher priority for me, and that's what I'm going to support. And the last thing I want to say is, for a long time, it's no secret that I've asked questions multiple times about having a sustainability plan for the ESSER funds, and the thought around putting personnel on ESSER funds, because knowing that those funds are going to run out. And I think when we started the LTOP process, one of the things that I asked was, how can we reduce how many personnel that we put on ESSER funds, so until we find out how much of those funds can we use and allocate for our building projects. That ESSER is a time-bound funding. Our buildings will last for 50 to 100 years. And so to me, it's smarter and wiser to put it in at least as much of a portion of that into our buildings. So the last thing I'll say is to everyone listening, to everyone who lives, works, plays, and loves Akron, know that for me, this is not an easy decision. I don't have a decision made up in my head yet, but I am more than willing and interested in exploring any other options, any other rocks that we can uncover to make the best equitable decision. For me, it's, we cannot redo the past harms when we rebuilt all of our buildings to certain communities, but what we can do is learn from them, and that's what I plan on doing as we move forward in this process. Thank you.
Mr. Alexander.
And I failed to say this here. If possible, and if we can, when we're doing our plan, it did make sense when I heard the community speaking that if we could keep Miller South kids, elementary and high school together, as well as the STEM elementary and high school together. If there's some way we can do that, I think that would be great, because that's some great continuity for those kids. So apologize for not saying that earlier.
Ms. McKittrick? All right. So the one thing I'm probably the most certain about tonight is that those of you from Miller South don't want to repurpose the building. I think you would prefer to have something that was state-of-the-art and really attempts to provide the facilities that in their full depth and breadth that you've been asking for a long time. And I think that's probably the common thematic element that ran through all of our comments tonight. So please rest assured that we hear you, we appreciate the feedback, and again, those of you that stayed the entire time, this is a great lesson in local civics and community involvement. So having said that,
Okay, so I only saw an academics, and I'm sorry, the Morley building on one of the options, and it's $20 million to renovate Morley. And so then I was looking at on multiple options, the various elementary school closings. And so I'm just curious, as another option, something that I would like to support, because I too am a component of things staying downtown. But if we increase, is that even a possibility, Superintendent? Maybe you can like to increase. If Miller South was to get a new building and say like a larger size building, is it possible if they have now however many 8th grades that with enrollment, if that doubled, those kids that are coming from some of those elementary schools or middle that's in 4th and 5th, will it open up auditions and opportunities for those kids that are coming out of these schools that may possibly close, and they will be able, if they have that propensity for the performing arts, to then attend Miller South, and that will help give more access and also save money, because you wouldn't have to, because you would be sending them to a building that's already being created for Miller South, those younger people. And so then it would be less that would have to go into possibly a low enrolled CLCs, as you've already said, like nice buildings that would go into other, redistrict into other schools.
I'm sorry,
And I'm sorry if that was like a little rambling, but I'm just processing.
I just need to make sure I understand what your question is. Are you asking if we were to repurpose an elementary school, if the students would automatically go? Or are you saying would they be given the opportunity to apply like the other students are given?
Yeah. So I'm basically saying would they have an opportunity to apply because we can increase the numbers, right?
Correct.
And so since we're going to keep 4th and 5th grade, 4th through 8th, that those children currently that'll be going to from buildings that are closing down, could still have a more opportunity. And I'm just wondering what's the rubric for those who apply? How are they selected to come in? Because I heard a lot of diversity and equity that Miller South talked about, and I'm just wondering how good that would look for the district. We could increase class sizes and even more people from outside the district to come into a larger building that may can focus on 4th through 8th while redoing Morley for STEM high next and keeping STEM middle where it is.
Well, we would definitely give them the opportunity to apply. I think also we would look into marketing even for outside of the district, right, for that opportunity for open enrollment. So as far as morally and what would go there, I think that's the discussion you guys are having. So once...
I'm just saying that, that's
okay.
The other part was for just the elementaries that are closing to kind of close that gap as far as where they would go. If some of them, all of them aren't going to be, that's not going to be.
We would have to, there would be multiple things we would have to look at. Once it would be decided which schools could possibly close, we would have to look at changing boundaries and at the same time open enrollment. And we've done that in the past. For instance, when we closed Rankin, we let the parents know what their new homeschool would be considered and also extended the open enrollment deadline. So if they wanted to look at other options, they were given that opportunity.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we good? Okay. I just checking. Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you all for joining us tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. So moved by Mr. Alexander. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly seconded by Ms. Autry. Is there any discussion? Roll call, please, Mr. Atkins.
Mrs. McKittrick?
Yes.
Dr. Akbar?
Yes.
Dr. Hall?
Aye.
Ms. Autry?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
The motion carries. We stand in adjournment at 7:56 p.m. on March 20th. Thank you.